Hello and welcome back to Oily Puddles Garage. Today we're going to be doing something a little bit different. We're going to be making a special tool. This is my version of the Churchill RG225. Now this tool will allow you to tighten up the cylinder head bolts or torque up the cylinder head bolts without removing the rockers. Now, Churchill actually made over 40 different special tools for use on the Alpine, but they rarely come up for sale, and when they do, they tend to be very expensive. They're certainly out of my pay grade. So over the years, I've had to make up my own. If you look at the refurbishing the suspension video, for example, you'll see the special tool that I made to put the metal elastic bushes into the suspension pans. It cost very little and it does the job exactly as it needs to. I knocked up this tool to pull the front pulley off of the crankshaft on a Sunbeam Alpine. It's nice and simple, does the job. Now, much the same with the RG225, I can't afford a real one, so I'm going to make one, and it will save a huge amount of time. In our family, we have 3 Alpines, and we also help friends with working on their engines, so it's not uncommon for us to be doing an engine rebuild. And after you've done the rebuild, it's easy enough to torque the cylinder head first time because the rockers aren't on. But after you've run the engine hot for a while and it's time to retighten that cylinder head, the rockers are in the way. You either have to remove them, get the push rods out of the way, and then torque the bolts down again, or you use this tool. Now, over the years, I've tried crow's feet and various other different spanner options. Never found anything that does the job the way the Churchill tool should. So this is my effort to make my version of a Churchill tool. It took about an hour. It should save hours and hours in the future. Now I'm starting off with an old 5/8 spanner and an old socket. First I'm cutting the spanner so that the end is off of it, and I'll grind that down a little bit. Then I position that on the cylinder head to see how much space I've got. I then get the MIG welder out and I'm welding cut end of the spanner back on at a near sort of 90 odd degree angle. A little bit less because this spanner's got an angle on it. Once that's done, again I'm positioning it on the engine, see how high I need to go, and I cut the spanner for a second time and re-weld the arm. Now you can see what I'm trying to do. I'm trying to make a spanner that will bend around where the rockers are and still allow me to put a torque wrench on the top and correctly tighten up the bolt. It's very important that the center line from the center of the bolt to the center of the drive of the torque wrench are absolutely in line. So as you have the bend around the rockers, it's important you don't weld this incorrectly. So pay attention to that. Keep looking through the end of the ring back up to where the socket's going to be welded on. Here you can see I've welded both ends of the cut spanner together, and you can already see the principle of how this is going to work. But if I tried to torque anything up with this now, it would just bend. It wouldn't take the necessary force. So we're going to put some sides on it and then a supporting bolt we're going to weld into the center. First we cut one side, a little bit of angle iron from an old exhaust bracket, weld that on. Then we cut the other side and weld that on. You've made yourselves a little box here around the spanner shaft. Still, that's not giving me quite the strength I want. So I've got an old bolt. I've welded it into the center at the top where the drive is going to go, and to the arm to give me like a triangle support there. To strengthen the spine of the tool, I put a couple of bolts in here in the channel above the original spanner and inside of the two sides that I welded on. I welded the bolts in place and then built it up with weld, and you can see we've got an angled bolt at this end, an angled bolt at that end, and other bolts in that channel. That's a pretty strong tool now, and that does the job exactly as we need to do it. The cylinder head bolts need to be torqued up in stages to 45 foot-pounds, not 48 as some of the manuals show. Roots corrected this in a later service bulletin, so please only torque your cylinder head bolts to 45 foot-pounds. It'll be better for your head gasket. And if you're not using a high quality torque wrench, you probably won't be able to tell the difference between 48 and 45. So either hire or buy a decent torque wrench. Now, in order to test the tool I'm making, I've set the torque wrench to 60 pounds. This is going to give me plenty of headroom. I know it's not going to bend or break when I'm working on the engine. I have the bolt tightly fixed into the vise, the torque wrench set to 60 pounds. When I can hear the torque wrench clicking at 60 foot-pounds without any bending or deformation in the tool, I know that it's strong enough and I've got everything correct. Here you can see the homemade tool on all of the different cylinder head bolts. Depending on how high you've made the tool, depends on where you need to do the cutouts on the side. I use a power file to cut it out. You can see on the sides there I've nibbled it out so it retains the strength but will still allow me to torque everything up between those push rods and underneath the rockers. Now, for the sake of the video, to give some clarity, I've used some Tipp-Ex and put some numbers on the cylinder head bolt. This one here is number 1, number 2, number 3, number 4 tucked in there, number 5, number 6, etc. Now, the engine is stone cold. We leave it overnight before we retighten the cylinder head. And what we do is we back off one flat to break the stiction and then torque it up to 45 foot-pounds. If you don't back off the one flat, either you'll find the torque wrench clicking without moving the bolt, or it might well jerk and jolt and go too far. So just back it off one flat and then tighten on the torque wrench to 45. Here you can see number 1 has been backed off one flat. When we torque it up, it will probably move 3 or 4 flats round. Now we have the torque wrench set to 45 foot-pounds and the special tool that we've made fitted on bolt number 1 to retighten it. Now we can see that the Tipp-Ex mark I put on has gone to the right. It's a bit difficult to see on that one, but it's gone just over one flat further clockwise when I've tightened the head. Maybe we'll see it better on number 2. Here I've loosened off number 2 by turning it anti-clockwise for one flat. Now I'm going to torque it to 45 foot-pound. It's a bit easier to see it here than it was on number 1, that's why I've refilmed it. Right, now that's clicking off there at 45 foot-pounds, and you can see that it's turned a little bit more to the right on the same torque setting. We're going to do this now for every other cylinder head bolt. On some of the cylinder head bolts, I found it easier to loosen off one flat with a spanner and then use the special tool to get in for tightening. Bolts 4 and 5 are the trickiest. You need to do a little from each side and reposition the tool as you tighten them up. I've now tightened up all of the cylinder head bolts and the 2 nuts on the studs. They're all done to 45 foot-pounds. And when you look at the numbers that I put on with Tipex, you can see there on numbers 6, 2 and 3, they've all turned slightly more clockwise than they were. This is because once you've overcome the stiction and retorqued it, the head has gone down fractionally. Now, it's good practice now to run the engine until it's hot and then just check the tappets because they may have closed up by a thou or two. But it doesn't look particularly pretty. I don't claim to be a great welder, but it's strong and it will take all the force you have to do. If you can get a genuine Churchill tool like this, you could afford it, get it. If you can't, this is a perfectly good option. If you've got better skills than me or better tools than me, you'll make a nicer job of it. But with basic hand tools and a MIG welder, for the cost of a couple of pounds, I've managed to make a tool that does the job. I thoroughly recommend you make one of these if you're going to find yourself working on an engine regularly. I hope that this video has been useful for you, and I hope that you can make a tool like this and find it helpful in your garage. If anybody out there has any alternatives they've made for special tools, if you'd like to send me a link to your channel or video, or send me the video and I'll post it on the Sunbeam Alpine channel. So long as it's available free to everybody, we're more than happy to promote any other channels and publish any links you want to send. Thank you ever so much for watching. We'll see you next time. From Oily Puddles Garage, from the Sunbeam Alpine channel, goodbye.